Midnight here with another special report. Today I thought I'd dig my meat hooks into a true American original, Kellogg's Cornflakes. But before I proceed, a word from our sponsor, Bell Asbestos. For fireproof drywall, ceiling insulation, and flooring so safe that little Johnny could sleep on it, look no further than Bell Asbestos. The story of cornflakes begins in 1894 when industrialist Will Kellogg invented a simple cereal, originally made of wheat, for patients at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. In 1898, Will traded wheat for corn and history was made. The patients took a shine to Kellogg's cornflakes, and Will eventually decided to market his creation along with his brother John, who was the superintendent of the sanitarium. Around the same time, a former patient of the Michigan Health Resort, Charles Post, founded a competing enterprise producing grape nuts in 1897. But for my bacon, the only thing snazzier than having a clam bake with the dame at the clip joint is a bowl of cornflakes that's bursting with moxie and fortified with enough B12 and iron to help our boys in Europe take the fight to the Krauts. What's that? Ah, right you are. We already defeated the Krauts 77 years ago. Would you just look at these swell flakes of corn? It doesn't take a wing ding at the speakeasy to blow your wig at this wild romp. This classic is keener than a bowl of plain oatmeal, and if you add milk or sugar, then it's wilder than a G-man doing the jitterbug. Of course, the original reason for cornflakes was anything but a ring-a-ding-ding. The Kellogg brothers were Seventh-day Adventists, and John in particular thought pleasures of the flesh were harmful and that meats and spicy foods increased the desire to make whoopee. So John prescribed a bland, tasteless diet, mostly whole grains and nuts, for the sanitarium patients in an effort to cleanse their bodies and souls. From that sprung cornflakes, though even after setting up the Sanchez Food Company in 1900 to sell their flake cereals through mail order, John Kellogg refused Will's suggestion to add sugar to make it more palatable to the masses. Being a budding tycoon and tired of trying to sway his drip of a brother, Will purchased the rights to make cornflakes from John, added sugar, and marketed them under his new venture, Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company. About as catchy as a cicada mimetic knucklehead. The new and improved cornflakes were a real humdinger and raked into clams, and after a legal battle with his brother over the use of their surname, Will rebranded his business as the Kellogg Cereal Company. Today, Kellogg's boasts swell brands like Raisin Bran, Special K, Fruit Loops, Frosted Flakes, Eggo, Pop-Tarts, Rice Krispies, and a lot more. But there's nothing quite like the all-American toasted flakes of corn that put them on the map, from the Big Apple to the City of Angels. Thanks again for joining me for this special report. Be sure to subscribe to my televisual program and remember to do your patriotic duty and buy some war bonds or the commies win. Thanks, and tune in next time for more keen commentary and ace analysis. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. And you ever wonder where the all-American idiom "the greatest thing since sliced bread" comes from? Of course you have. You're not some sniveling beatnik forced to stand in a Rusky bread line. But first, a word from our sponsor, Lucky Strike. For help dealing with life's troubles, a hard day at work, a philandering husband, or childbirth, look no further than Lucky Strike. Everyone wants the straight dope on the swellest thing before sliced bread, but have you ever considered where the expression sprung in the first place? Inventor and engineer Otto Frederick Rohwedder was born in Davenport, Iowa in 1880, the youngest of 4 brothers and a sister. And after graduating with a degree in optics from Northern Illinois in 1900, this egghead decided to become a jeweler. And after plying his trade for a bit, he'd eventually own 3 jewelry stores in St. Joseph, Missouri, the Peoria of the Midwest. A mere 18 years prior, the famous outlaw Jesse James met his end in that same town, which was also the starting point of the Pony Express, and Otto had an ace jewelry business there until 1916. But the young inventor had a dream of becoming the first thing since sliced bread. Otto had begun work on an automatic bread slicing machine while he was still a jeweler back in 1912. 4 years later, he sold his jewelry concern and decided to pursue his half-baked vision full-time. He came close to realizing his ambition, including one prototype that held the bread together with metal pins. But in 1917, a fire destroyed everything and wiped the entire slate clean. It'd be more than a decade before Otto could recoup his losses, but during that time, he experimented with new ideas. And the shrewd hotshot realized that a loaf of sliced bread would go stale quickly, so he began work on a contraption that would slice the bread and package it. In 1927, Otto finally completed his machine and filed for a patent, which in typical Uncle Sam fashion was finally granted 5 years later. And in 1928, he sold his first machine to the Chillicothe Baking Company, which sold its first loaf of sliced packaged bread on July of that same year. But Chillicothe certainly wasn't alone. Another venture, the Chicago-based Long Company, also pioneered the idea of sliced bread in 1928, and there's some debate over which came first. In any case, sliced bread was initially a tough nut to crack, but after the American public warmed up to it, it took off. Customers took a real shine to pre-sliced bread, which ad men touted as the greatest forward step in the baking industry since bread was wrapped. Bread consumption increased, which boosted the sale of spreads and condiments, and probably the American waistline. At about the same time, one of the swellest additions to the all-American sandwich since ham and cheese was about to go national. The year was 1921. The Chinese commies first started mucking about, and the King Goose-Stepper himself took the reins of the National Socialist Party in Krautland. And on a lighter note, the Indianapolis-based Taggart Baking Company debuted Wonder Bread, which took its name when the Vice President for Merchandising Development, Elmer Klein, witnessed a kaleidoscope of color at the International Balloon Race in the Indy Motor Speedway. 4 years later, the Continental Baking Company purchased Taggart, making Wonder Bread a national brand. And when they released their own version of sliced bread under the Wonder Bread label in 1930, it transformed the eating habits of the nation. While there's some debate over the very first sliced bread, the brand to put it on the map and introduce it to John Q. Public was unequivocally Wonder Bread. By 1933, 80% of the bread sold in America was pre-sliced, and the intrepid ad man's original slogan morphed into the greatest thing since sliced bread. Wonder Bread would continue to get the bulge over the competition. In 1939, it had an exhibit on the grandest stage of them all, the New York World's Fair. With the Wonder Bakery exhibit, the Continental Baking Company had a wheat field, the first of its kind in 68 years in the Big Apple. Inside the exhibit, visitors could get an assortment of kicks, including the keenest funny since Max Fleischer.
We are the bakers who mix the dough and bake the bread in an oven slow and work for the continental.
These days, Thunderheads claim everything is the greatest thing since sliced bread, from the snazziest blouse to the newest televisual program. But just remember that sliced bread was once the greatest thing unto itself. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Be sure to subscribe to my own televisual program. By far, the greatest thing since a baked product was pre-sliced and wrapped up into a neat little package. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off.
It was one of those days. We're looking over case files, drinking whatever cheap booze I can swing on a gumshoe's salary, with trouble hanging over my head like the sword of Damocles. In this city, a pretty face is just as likely to stick a knife in your heart as steal it. I thought my cynicism had inoculated me against dizzy dames, temptation in the flesh. But then she had to walk back into my life.
Yeah, come in.
It's been a long time, Midnight.
Too long, dollface.
I hear you're a part-time Seamus these days.
Whatever pays the bills.
I left some Maltesers on the table and they were snatched. They're a precious commodity these days. I'll pay $200 for their return. They were right there. You believe me, Midnight, don't you?
Well, I don't believe your story, but I believe your 200 clams. Alright, for old time's sake. Give me some time to look into it. And you always have a smooth explanation at the ready.
What do you want me to do? Learn to stutter?
Well, the cheaper the crook, the gaudier the patter. And I distrust a closed-mouthed man. Now, let's talk about the Maltesers.
Midnight, you worry me. You always think you know what you're doing, but you're too slick for your own good.
Well, I came through with the goods, didn't I?
You're cute.
And I'm getting cuter by the minute.
You've earned this. All's well that ends well.
Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. And today we're taking a delicious look at one of America's oldest and favorite snacks, the Twinkie. But first, a word from our sponsor, Camel Cigarettes. Did you know that the smoke of slow-burning Camels contains 28% less nicotine than leading competitors? Joe DiMaggio himself claims they're easy on the throat, milder in every way, and the medical community concurs. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. So for digestion's sake, smoke Camels. Twinkies are the swellest snacks in sliced something or the other, and that's peachy keen because they have the same sugar daddy as Wonder Bread. In 1930, James Alexander Dewar was trying to make use of his company's shortbread baking pans during the strawberry off-season. At the time, he was working for the Continental Baking Company, the same hip cats who purchased the Tiger Baking Company, thereby acquiring the rights to Wonder Bread. In something of a bind, Dewar filled a shortcake with banana cream, and the Twinkie was born. Now you might be scratching the old noggin, calling old Jimmy a fibber. A Twinkie with banana cream? What a bunch of malarkey, I hear you saying. Well, during WW2, when we kicked the Krauts Keister for the second time, bananas were strictly rationed, so Dewar swapped the starchy fruit for vanilla, creating the Twinkie we all know today. In the heyday of Reaganomics and the final death knell for the commies, the Continental Baking Company experimented with different flavors, and in 2007, to coincide with the remake of one of my favorite childhood pictures, King Kong, they re-released the Banana Twinkie. And while some flavor concoctions were swell and others not so much, none managed to touch the classic vanilla cream filling, which endured throughout the 20th century. And speaking of enduring, there's a tall tale surrounding Twinkies that's mostly hogwash, and I'd like to give you all the straight dope. According to legend, because Twinkies supposedly only contain artificial ingredients, they have no expiration date, and pictures and TV programs have reinforced this myth. But if you take a gander at the ingredients, there's clearly food in it, and the original Twinkie shelf life was about 26 days because of the absence of dairy products and the use of airtight cellophane wrappers. 26 days is a lot longer than most baked treats, but a far cry from forever. In 2013, after a one-year absence during which their parent company declared bankruptcy, Twinkies returned in a new svelte form that, along with added preservatives, lasted 45 days. The original Twinkie weighed 42.5 grams with 150 kilocalories, but after parent company Hostess declared Chapter 11 in 2012, and their subsequent purchase by Apollo Global Management and Metropolis & Company in 2013, the number one iconic junk food shed some weight, coming in at 38.5 grams with 135 kilocalories, and a lifespan of 19 extra days. And over the years, the Twinkies had more pop cultural references than nearly any other confection, appearing in everything from Ghostbusters to Die Hard, The Deer Hunter, The Iron Giant, WALL-E, and plenty more. Tragically, it also became an unofficial part of jurisprudence when the lawyer defending Dan White for the murders of San Francisco City Supervisor Harvey Milk and Mayor George Moscone happened to mention that his normally clean-cut client had become depressed and was gorging himself on junk food like Coca-Cola and Twinkies. And as a result of White's depression, he allegedly suffered a diminished mental capacity to be held fully criminally liable for the murders. This odd strategy actually worked, getting White acquitted of the most serious charge of first-degree murder and him being convicted of voluntary manslaughter, and forever more improbable legal gambles like that became informally known as the Twinkie defense. Luckily for us, Twinkies have stood for far more good than bad, and the name means a lot more than a bonkers murder defense. These days, Twinkies come in a broad assortment of flavors, including the original banana, and non-standard products like Twinkie cereal by Post. And whenever the pressures of being a full-time newsman and a part-time gumshoe get to be too much and I'm not in the mood for a smoke, there's nothing quite like the classic taste of a Twinkie. Be sure to help me grow my business by subscribing to my televisual program, and I'll have a lot more content coming your way. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off.
Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. And there's few snacks more swell, more quintessentially American than Oreos. The good old US of A began its love affair with this chocolate wafer and cream filling confection before the Great War, all the way back in 1912. And through both our tussles with the Krauts, our stare down with the commies, and I think that's the only event of note in the 20th and 21st centuries. Someone told me something about some spiritual trouble in Arabia, but I'm sure that'll resolve itself. Through all that, Oreos became the best-selling cookie in America and around the world. And every geezer has their own method for eating Oreos, though the most popular approach looks a bit like the prelude to making whoopee. You spread the tender wafers and dip your tongue into the sweet, sweet cream. What double entendre? And once you've had your fill of the cream, and you should probably put your rugrats to sleep for this one. Once you've had your fill of the cream and you've reached the peak of ecstasy, then you'll have even more cream of a sort to whet your appetite. Especially with the new Neapolitan Oreos, which combines 3 different kinds of cream. As you'd expect, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry, layered together between waffle cone flavored wafers. And, well, you probably can't tell there's 3 flavors, so just this once. Yeah, that's the ticket. As beautiful and colorful as a streetwise dame. If you grew up in the land of the free and the home of the brave, then you're almost certainly familiar with Neapolitan ice cream, which dates back to 1839 when the head chef of the Royal Prussian household created the very first such recipe. And speaking of first, Neapolitan was the very first ice cream to combine 3 different flavors. And while it may or may not have been named after the Italian city of Napoli, it's remained popular through the present day. For my money, there's nothing quite like a box of Oreos or a few scoops of Neapolitan ice cream on a hot summer day. But combining the two, well, let's take a closer look. The National Biscuit Company, or Nabisco, hit a genuine dinger with this one. The waffle cone wafers are a good change of pace from the standard chocolate variety, both nice in their own respects. And with the chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry cream each competing equally for your attention, this really is the closest a cookie will ever come to Neapolitan ice cream. My only beef, and it's a small one, is that you don't always taste all 3 flavors at once. That's not always a problem with the ice cream unless you scoop all 3 at once, and it's not an issue if you prefer the licking Oreo method. But if you bite into the whole cookie, at least one of the flavors will be subordinate to the other 2. However, that's just nitpicking. I could easily wolf down the whole box of these, but if I did, I'd end up looking like Marlon Brando in his later years. So I give the Neapolitan Oreos 4.5 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to this here televisual program so I can afford to eat this week. Newsmen and gumshoes aren't exactly raking in the clams. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. And that limey fop previously reviewed America's oblong-shaped pride and joy M&Ms, and he was able to get that 10-foot stick out of his keister long enough to mention M&M's original inspiration, Smarties. But not the Smarties you're thinking of. This is the version hailing from the snooty capital of the world. Because of its candy shell, the chocolate within these oblate spheroids doesn't melt even in warm climates. In the 1930s, Forrest Mars Sr. happened to observe soldiers in the Spanish Civil War eating Smarties, and, well, good chocolatiers borrow and great ones steal. M&M's was born. But Smarties actually dates back much further than that. In 1882, the British confectionery Rowntree's introduced chocolate beans, later renamed Smarties chocolate beans, and finally in 1937, just Smarties. That fop's secretary, Barbara, she was nice enough to send me some of these precursors to M&M's, so the least I could do was try them. To no surprise, these Smarties taste very similar to M&M's, though it'd be more accurate to say M&M's are darn near identical to Smarties. Their ingredients are comparable, though they're a bit different in the looks department. Smarties sports different colors than M&M's, but they all taste the same. Their size, however, is a bit more consequential, with Smarties at least 30 to 40% bigger than M&M's. Otherwise, these are carbon copies of each other, though again, Smarties did come first. And I do suddenly feel about 55% more pompous, my wit is 46% drier, and I have the sudden urge to watch pro wrestling. So I rate Smarties 5 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to this televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off.
Jimmy Midnight here with another special report.
Brought to you by Pepsi-Cola. Unlike the other guy, ours doesn't have cocaine.
And the only thing more American than baseball, apple pie, and telling other countries what's what is Hershey's chocolate.
Also brought to you by the Hershey Company, because I have no shame.
The history of the Hershey Company begins with the man Milton S. Hershey, who was born in the small rural farming community of Dairy Township, Pennsylvania in 1857. The Hersheys were members of Pennsylvania's Mennonite community, and at the time of Milton's birth, the town numbered just north of 2,000 people.
Milton's family was frequently on the move, and as a result, young Hershey only completed the 4th grade. But Milton was overflowing with grit and gumption as a result of his early days working the family farm. And after losing his job at a German-English newspaper, he took up an apprenticeship at a candy maker in Lancaster.
The 14-year-old wannabe mogul showed a knack for the candy business, and after a 4-year apprenticeship with the esteemed Joseph Royer, Milton opened his own confectionery concern in Philadelphia, the birthplace of liberty. After his Philly business went belly up, he attempted 2 more ventures in New York and the stomping grounds of Capone himself, Chi-Town. Milton failed both times, but along the way he gained valuable experience, including training at the most famous American chocolatier at the time, Hyler's in Manhattan.
From there, Milton's fortunes began to turn around. Having earned his stripes many times over, Hershey returned to Lancaster in 1883 and opened the Lancaster Caramel Company, which was a wild success, especially after a traveler placed a huge bulk order for our former colonial overlords across the pond.
Milton refined and mastered his caramel enterprise with the addition of fresh milk, but the budding tycoon had the wandering eye, like every man saddled with the same broad for an extended period of time, and he'd soon realize his true life's calling.
In 1893, Chicago hosted the World's Columbian Exposition, held to honor the 400th anniversary of the voyage of Christopher Columbus, whose impeccable character and spotless reputation will never be sullied. The Chicago World's Fair was a sprawling 690-acre expo which spotlighted American exceptionalism and the burgeoning Beaux Arts neoclassical design principles.
The fair drew 46 participating countries and would eventually attract 27 million visitors over nearly 6 months of operation. At the time, it was by far the largest World's Fair, and amongst all its architectural, technological, musical, and artistic exhibits, it debuted quintessential American grub like cream of wheat, juicy fruit gum, Quaker Oats, and Pabst Blue Ribbon. But for Milton S. Hershey, it was the coming-out party for chocolate.
Enamored with the Kraut's chocolate-making machinery, Hershey purchased the equipment and began making his own chocolate confections. By 1900, Milton decided to focus exclusively on his chocolate ventures, so he sold his caramel business for $1 million, or about 32.5 million clams in today's dough.
That same year, Milton began production on the very first Hershey's Milk chocolate bars, but the best was yet to come. In 1903, the same year as the first World Series, the first Western film, and the first sustained motorized aircraft flight, Milton returned to Dairy Church to build a new factory, founding the planned community of Hershey, Pennsylvania for his workers and their families.
While company towns weren't unknown, Hershey had beautiful tree-lined streets and single and two-family brick houses with modern amenities like electricity, indoor plumbing, and central heating. And residents had access to a public trolley system and a free public school, and later on, golf courses, a community center, a hotel, sports areas, and a zoo.
But the real jewel of the town launched 3 years later when Hershey Park opened its doors to provide quality leisure for residents of the sweetest place on earth. Today, this fully functional theme park welcomes over 3 million visitors from around the world. Its confines a tribute to Milton Hershey's all-American entrepreneurial spirit.
Over the next couple decades, Hershey introduced additional chocolate staples like the miniature conical-shaped Hershey's Kiss in 1907, Mr. Goodbar in 1925, and Hershey Syrup in 1926, while brands like Jolly Ranchers, Twizzlers, Almond Joy, York Peppermint Patties, Reese's, Kit Kat, Payday, Skinny Pop, and a lot more would eventually fall under the broad umbrella of the Hershey Company. When the stock market crashed in 1929, Milton Hershey initiated the Great Building Campaign to help Hershey, PA weather the financial storm. And as a result, the town was almost completely inoculated from the ruinous social and economic effects right outside their doorstep. First off, Hershey donated his neoclassical mansion as a clubhouse to the new country club, and the 73-year-old lived in 2 rooms on the 2nd floor. Over the next decade, town laborers completed a lavish Italian Renaissance-style community building. They built Hotel Hershey, which sat atop the newly constructed Pat's Hill, and a swell assortment of structures like a junior-senior high school, a sports arena, a new corporate headquarters, a 15,000-seat outdoor stadium, and a cultural and educational foundation for the town's residents. Because of all these projects, and especially since building materials were dirt cheap, Hershey maintained a 100% employment rate for its 600 laborers, and the company didn't give a single employee the old heave-ho. The town stood in such stark contrast to the rest of the country that in 1937, Newsweek dubbed Hershey Candyland, City of Dreams, where residents pay no local taxes and a candy factory gives them their jobs and the luxurious clubs, schools, churches, and shady streets. Once the Depression ended, all of Hershey's building projects helped it become a major tourist attraction. When the Krauts began their invasion of Europe in 1939, kicking off the Second World War in as many decades, our boys in uniform had much better chow than the days of crummy army crackers that were hard enough to crack a tooth. Though, hardtack was actually a great way to soothe the nerves. Spending enough time with that stuff and the prospect of buying the farm doesn't seem all that bad. At the outbreak of WW2, our ace food scientists had dreamt up letter-coated field rations that featured top-grade all-American beef, fresh fruits and vegetables, and was fortified with more flavor than a scrumptious steak dinner, more vitamins than a bowl of oatmeal, and made John Q. Flatfoot and Susie Homemaker wish they could join the fight just to share in this fine cuisine. Or at least that's what the boys at the War Department told me.
The combat ration C, which I have here, a box, is designed to take care of a man in combat for 1 day. Let me show you the contents of this box. There are in total of 8 cans. 3 cans of bacon.
I didn't eat that well at my own wedding. In addition to the C rations and K rations, the military also commissioned an emergency ration to take the form of a chocolate bar. And so the War Department came knocking on Hershey's door. The military's requirements for their envisioned D ration were simple. It had to be 4 ounces, be high in energy, able to withstand high temperatures, and so troops would only eat them while they were in a pickle, it should taste a little better than a boiled potato. For the temperature requirement, Hershey's added raw oat flour, which absorbed most of the cocoa fat and made the bar more solid, raising the melting point of the chocolate from 92 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The final ingredients were chocolate liqueur, sugar, skim milk powder, cocoa butter, oat flour, and vanillin, which resulted in a heavy paste that had to be pressed rather than poured into bowls. Unfortunately, they were a bit too peachy keen on the military's last condition, and most troops reported that they would have been happier with a boiled potato. The bar's high melting point made it hard as a brick, so troops had to use knives to shave off slices, and the sugar apparently did little to disguise the bitter taste of the dark chocolate. The package actually warned against eating the D ration too quickly, or it could cause a stomachache. Hershey's became an indispensable part of the war effort. In 1939, the chocolatier produced about 100,000 D ration bars per day, but by 1945, production lines on 3 floors of the plant were pumping out 24 million units per week. In 1943, Hershey's produced a special tropical version of their D ration bar for the Pacific Theater that was extra resistant to the heat and tasted mildly better. Hershey's tropical chocolate bar would eventually go to the moon with Apollo 15 astronauts in 1971. As a result of their invaluable contributions to the war effort, Hershey's was awarded the Army-Navy E-Production Award in August 22, 1944. In presenting the award, Major General Edmund Gregory noted that the men and women of Hershey Chocolate Corporation have every reason to be proud of their great work in backing up our soldiers on the fighting fronts. By the end of the war, Hershey's had received 5 such honors. Unfortunately, that same year, Milton Hershey followed FDR into the great unknown and passed away at the age of 88, leaving behind a chocolate empire and town bearing his name, and a long and generous history of philanthropy. In 1909, Milton and his wife Catherine had established a school for orphan boys, and 3 years after Catherine's premature death in 1915, he endowed the school with his entire fortune of Hershey Chocolate Company stock. Even after Milton's death, the company continued its charitable works, founding the Milton S. Hershey Medical Center in 1963 with a $50 million grant from the Hershey Foundation. In 1950, Hershey's adopted the bold, snazzy insignia we'd all associate with the brand today. And in 1973, they became the first confectionery to add nutritional info to their label, though it may have contradicted their original Hershey's bar label, which said a nutritious confection. In 1963, Hershey's acquired the H.B. Reese Candy Company, officially bringing Reese's Peanut Butter Cups into the fold. And over the next several decades, Hershey's purchased a number of confectionery superstars like Twizzlers in 1977, the U.S. operations of Almond Joy Mounds and York Peppermint Patties in 1988, and Jolly Rancher in 1996. And through it all, Hershey's has upheld its founder's sense of civic duty and altruism, being a founding member of the World Cocoa Foundation, which invests in West Africa to support cocoa farmers and improve cacao agriculture. More recently, Hershey's made Diversity Inc.'s list of the top 50 companies for diversity. If there is a giant confectionery in the sky, and I know that's most folks' idea of heaven, Milton S. Hershey is surely looking down with a huge smile on his face, happy that his company and life's work are in good hands. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please subscribe to my televisual program, and be sure to do your patriotic duty and buy some war bonds or the commies win. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. And this German candy is making me uncomfortable. Like if I eat it, I'll start goose-stepping and starting world wars. The sensible part of me knows that Milka began life in Switzerland in 1901, and even when they switched production to Lorach, Germany, it was long before the tenure of the National Socialists. But it has been the pride and joy of Deutschland for over a century, including the abbreviated 10-year reign of the 1,000-year Reich. And over the last century, the only bright spot from the Krauts was pretzels. That doesn't quite balance the scales. But at least a few people have taken quite a shine to Milka, so we might have a fresh mark in the win column. Then again, Germany isn't exactly known for their fine cuisine. As the old saw goes, happiness is a German cook who doesn't. But they do get a bum rap when it comes to their humor. Anyone who says the Krauts are too serious has obviously never heard this classic German pun.
Den Frieden wollen wir, aber diese ununterbrochene Entrückung lehnen wir ab.
The name itself is the German words Milch, meaning milk, and Kakao, meaning cocoa. And I probably brutalized those names, but I'm American, so who cares? And you've probably guessed that the milk is a key part of the brand, since they only source milk from cows fed on alpine grass. And appropriately, their logo, since day one, was a cow named Mila, which means lilac in German. Since 2012, Milk has been owned by Mondelez International, the same guys responsible for, well, pretty much everything, including Sour Patch Kids. For my first foray into Milka, I got the Oreo variety, just so a small trace of Americana could hopefully cancel out all the Kraut Scheiße. I am definitely not inclined to like something from this part of the world, but I'd be a dirty, rotten fibber if I called this anything but delicious. The weather right now is hotter than Hedy Lamarr, so this Milka arrived as soup, and I had to put it in the icebox. So this wasn't the snazziest looking candy bar, but the taste more than makes up for it. A 100-gram bar has 53 grams of sugar, so the sweetness is kind of a given. But it also has a smooth flavor to it that can only assume is their special alpine grass milk. Luckily, the bar doesn't have any particular side effects. I don't suddenly feel the need to invade Poland or piss off 3/4 of the globe, but I do have a hankering for female body hair and Rammstein. So I guess there's a few side effects. So I rate the Milka Oreo bar 5 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to this televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. Another day, another Kraut confection to contemplate. Because whoever owns this interweb program enjoys torturing me with stuffy European chocolate just as much as he likes needling that pompous fop with Americana archetypes. But to be fair, I still have fond memories of my private shindig with Milka, so I'm willing to give this one a shot without too much complaint. The treat in question, Shogen, has been around since the early 60s, so the company never rubbed elbows with anyone fond of goose-stepping, or at least after the enterprise was formed. There's no telling how many executives might have expressed fondness for the fastidious felonious Führer 20 years earlier. But for the sake of this review, I'll assume everyone with Shogen, from the CEO to the janitors, hated the National Socialists just as much as they hated the commies. In 1962, the same year the Ruskies were mucking around in Cuba, Shogen was born. And over the next 6 decades, the brand established itself as one of the most beloved European chocolatiers. They're the European equivalent to Ghirardelli. Premium confectioners with hard-to-pronounce names that generally play second or third fiddle to more well-known chocolatiers within their host country. Shogun has become known for its individually perforated and portioned chocolate bars, not unlike the Hershey bars, with a variety of flavors and a deep connection to Germany over the latter half of the 20th century and into the 21st. But unlike Hershey's Great American Chocolate Bar, Shogun treats don't include butyric acid as a byproduct of the production process. But that's a subject for a different day. This time I'll be taking the plunge with the hazelnut variety, and with 50 grams of sugar per 100 gram bar, I don't think the sweetness will be an issue. However, similar to the Milka, this Shogun bar arrived in liquid form, a consequence of weather that's hotter than Greta Garbo. But after a quick trip to the icebox, the bar is ready for its closing. Say what you will about Germany's penchant for always sounding like they're angry, even if they aren't, but this is keener than a hot shave. I don't even usually prefer hazelnuts or any other nut in my chocolate. But while this isn't the prettiest treat owing to the weather, it's sweeter than Faith bacon and more satisfying than a T-bone steak. The flavor just explodes off each square with the potency of Little Boy and the triumph of Mount Suribachi. And with euphoria like this, I can almost forgive the Krauts for everything. Not quite, but almost. So I rate the Shogun Hazelnut Bar 5 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. And I managed to get a hold of this British snack that bears an uncanny resemblance to an American brand that rhymes with haze. From its logo, to its packaging, to the fact that it carries the Flamin' Hot label, it's, what's that? Since 1989? Oh, Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. British snack manufacturer Walker's was founded in 1948 in Leicester. And no, wait. Let me get in a proper limey spirit. I'll just stick a giant stick up my keister and... Oh, it's Leicester. In the 1880s, a fine British chap by the name of Henry Walker moved to Leicester to form what became a highly successful butcher shop. And while Walkers & Sons produced meat pies through the late Victorian period, the Great War, and World War II, meat rationing after a second tussle with the Krauts forced Walker to consider other options. He eventually landed on potato crisps, or potato chips in American, and Walker's savvy pivot to frying potatoes made his new venture one of Britain's premier snack food companies. And then in 1989, Walker's was acquired by Frito-Lay, giving them global acclaim and access to a very similar looking logo, plus the same label shared by a beverage that Fop reviewed, and a few other American favorites. So for that reason, I avoided the Walker's snacks that Americans should already be intimately familiar with, like a carbon copy of Lay's Flamin' Hot, and I arrived at this curiosity, Monster Munch Flamin' Hot. These monstrous corn snacks have apparently been around since 1977, and the Brits being the strange creatures that they are, Monster Munch also comes in pickled onion and roast beef. But Katz's Deli is the only reasonable domain of roast beef, and pickled onion is a step too gross, so I'll stick with Flamin' Hot. Oh, and it's worth reiterating that British crisps are what we call potato chips, while their chips are one half of arguably their most famous addition to the culinary world. Not their tastiest, mind you, but their most recognizable. So let's see how these monstrous snacks shake out. These don't really share any ingredients with Takis, but they taste an awful lot like those famous Mexican treats. That plus a vaguely corny flavor and a hint of Funyuns? Something that's very artificial. I can't honestly say I find it all that pleasant, but I do appreciate that it mimics such a quintessential American snack enjoyed by the finest examples of humanity and American citizenry. So I rate the Walker's Monster Munch Flamin' Hot 3 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off.
Jimmy Midnight here with another special report.
Sometimes you can just tell that, yeah, it's European chocolate. I mean, look at this thing. It's like an edible British accent. Romney's Kendall Mint Cake is like attending a poetry reading at some posh cafe overlooking Oxford, with Michael Caine as the narrator, Beef Wellington on the menu, and Benedict Cumberbatch as the guest of honor. I feel my upper lip stiffening just looking at this treat. And with a legacy stretching all the way back to our first tussle with the crowds, Romney's has been stiffening all sorts of things for more than a century. After Romney's founder, Sam T. Clark, was discharged from the military in 1918, he began production on their flagship product, their Kendall Mint Cake. The Romney's name was apparently chosen because of the company's headquarters in Kendall and the town's association with famous portrait painter George Romney. However, I should point out that Kendall Mint Cake is a type of British confection not proprietary to Romney's. It's flavored with peppermint and is a popular source of energy. Like when the Romney's version attained worldwide recognition when Sir Edmund Hillary and Sardar Tenzing carried it in 1953 during the first successful summit of Mount Everest. Now, Romney's take on it is somewhat divisive, mainly because it contains white chocolate, and purists insist that because it contains cocoa butter and not cocoa solids, that it shouldn't even be called chocolate. And Kendall Mint Cake in general comes in a variety of configurations and chocolate types. I'm of a more inclusive mindset, unless we're talking about other political viewpoints or countries. But I won't write off white chocolate just because it's lacking a key component. Good Lord, is this thing sweet! Obnoxiously so! Even taking into account white chocolate's unique composition, this is enough to make your eyes bug out. You see, white chocolate contains 60% sugar and occasionally additives like vanilla, while milk chocolate has 50% and dark chocolate 25%, plus antioxidants. The high sugar content plus the sharp peppermint zest make this unbearable for my admittedly American flavor palate. I'm willing to grant that with this much sugar and a kick as strong as a zebra, the Romney's Kendall Mint Cake probably makes for a very effective source of energy. I just can't imagine eating it under normal circumstances lest I become real chummy with my dentist. So I rate Romney's Kendall Mint Cake 2.5 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. Say what you will about seasonal creep, but I love Halloween. The spooky atmosphere, the creepy pictures at the cinema, and gorging yourself on all manner of sugary candy. While I might play second fiddle to December, it's definitely one of the most wonderful times of the year. So when the higher-ups asked me to cover some Halloween-themed Kit Kats, I darn near did a backflip. What could be better than a quintessential American treat under the guise of the most fun holiday since Al Capone danced to Charleston on a flagpole? Okay, so that's a bit far-fetched. Technically, Kit Kat hails from the UK, originating back in 1911 when Rowntree's, a confectionery company based in York, England, trademarked two different spellings of Kit Kat. In the 1920s, they used that name for a box of chocolate crisps, though that version was soon discontinued. And then in 1935, a Rowntree employee suggested the company, quote, make a snack that a man could take to work in his pack. That became the Rowntree's Chocolate Crisp, which in 1937 was renamed to the Kit Kat Chocolate Crisp. Amazingly, for such a popular American treat, it didn't officially reach these shores until the Hershey Company introduced it in 1970. And the slogan we're all familiar with didn't come about until 13 years earlier when an intrepid ad man by the name of Donald Giles came up with the mantra, have a break, have a Kit Kat. Kit Kat's always been one of my favorite classic pieces of edible Americana, alongside Snickers, Milky Way, and Hershey's, to the point where it's easy to forget that the former was actually created across the pond. Either way, it's a childhood favorite of mine, and I'm not so big a purist that, well, I am, but I'm willing to make an exception for Kit Kat Witch's Brew and Kit Kat Pumpkin Pie. I'll start with the Witch's Brew, which includes crispy wafers covered in marshmallow-flavored cream, colored green, of course. I'm not quite sure how marshmallows relate to witches. And marshmallows actually seem to be the go-to flavor for American snacks and beverages that are indiscernible. Like Coke's slate of creations, whatever they're supposed to be. But I will give Hershey's credit for trying something different. Kinda. And not just relying on food coloring. So I'll rate the Kit Kat Witch's Brew 4 snazzy spoons out of 5. The next one falls under the much beloved and equally hated umbrella of pumpkin spice. It's become hip to hate on this lightning rod of a seasonal flavor. That European fop has mixed feelings on the matter, and judging by what I've seen on the interwebs, many folks are ashamed to admit they like it. Kit Kat Pumpkin Pie includes the normal crispy wafers with an orange exterior, and while the Witch's Brew is a bit questionable, this one is spot on. Apart from the original Kit Kat and Kit Kat Dark, I can't imagine a better alternative than this. The pumpkin pie cream coating is all the signature elements of pumpkin spice, so cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, and that plus a liberal amount of sweetness goes beautifully with the wafer filling. This is everything I hoped the holiday special edition could be, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. So I rate Kit Kat Pumpkin Pie 5 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off.
Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. Well, Halloween is here, the witching hour has arrived, and like the boss man did last year, I like to honor the ancient and sacred custom of the dad tax. You know the one. Any candy that passes through the confines of any domicile larger than a motor vehicle is subject to a levy of no less than 1 Snickers or the equivalent per 6 ounces. Teaches the little tykes their proper place in the family hierarchy and a healthy hatred for the taxman. So Jimmy Jr. is back from his All Hallows Eve objective, and it's time for him to pay up. So let's see here. First up is Skittle Shriekers. These little button-shaped candies are yet another American favorite that actually originated in Britain. Our cousins across the pond introduced them in 1974, before they found their way to the States in 1979, and domestic production began in 1982. In my mind, they've always played second fiddle to M&M's, totally different flavor and ingredients, but they're shaped the same and each includes a signifying letter, but it definitely has its place in the Americana pantheon. The gimmick with the Shriekers is that there's the occasional sour Skittle mixed in with the sweet ones, and the former makes you shriek. The problem is that the sour distribution is all out of whack. I'd go a mini pack or 2 without any, and then 2 or 3 in 1 pack. And even when I did get one, it wasn't nearly as sour as just regular sour Skittles. Certainly not enough to make you shriek. Next up is Dove Pumpkin. Dove being the American icon that's delighted this nation since 1939. Dove comes in a wide range of products, including ice cream bars, milk chocolate, and dark chocolate, among others, and its history parallels the country's beautiful melting pot, having been started by a Greek immigrant. Unfortunately, this particular variant is a lot less awe-inspiring, since the only part evoking All Hallows Eve is a snazzy design on the wrapper. The chocolate itself is more mundane than the G-Man having a plain bowl of oatmeal. Dove also allegedly includes a certain unwelcome chemical shared by Hershey's, that being butyric acid, which is present in butter, spoiled milk, and vomit. I had a dark chocolate confection, which is already a tad bitter, so it's hard to tell for sure whether butyric acid is present, but I definitely have my suspicions. Finally, I'd like to give a special shout out to all the Halloween heroes who buck tradition and give out full candy bars. These legends of All Hallows Eve create unforgettable memories and have the power to turn an average night into a spectacular gala. And that's how my son, and by extension I, acquired this gorgeous Snickers peanut brownie bar. If I were to rank my all-time favorite American chocolate bars, Snickers would easily be in the top 5, possibly number 1 depending on my mood. That combination of milk chocolate with nougat, peanuts, and caramel is unmatched. It's a true American original with a history that predates our second tussle with the Krauts and no shortage of great advertising over the years. And
And if you can believe it, the Snickers peanut brownie is as good or even better than the original, with the nougat swap for a delicious chocolate brownie. The change is so intuitive that you'd swear this is how it was always meant to be. And while Snickers isn't the first brand to experiment with brownies, this manifestation is one of the best I've ever tasted. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I hope everyone had a spookily satisfying Halloween. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. Those wacky Brits and their homegrown beverages. I blame Scotland, which is apparently the only country in the world where a Coca-Cola product isn't the most popular drink. I mean, Cuba hasn't officially imported Coke since the swinging 60s, and the commies in North Korea want nothing to do with classic pieces of Americana like this, but most countries in the world bow at the altar of Coke. Even one of the soft drinks I'm looking at today, despite being proudly made in Great Britain, falls under the Coca-Cola umbrella. Why the Brits care a lick about non-Coca-Cola soft drinks like Tizer and Club Lemon is anyone's guess, but I'm about to find out today. First on the docket is the lone Coke product of the trio, Lilt, which the company describes as the totally tropical taste. Lilt combines pineapple and grapefruit juices to create a citrus beverage that's supposedly inspired by the flavors of the Caribbean. To drive that point home, the brand ran a series of advertisements in the late 90s featuring two Jamaican women who'd eventually become known as the Lilt Ladies. Lilt has also undergone a rather dramatic formula change in the early 21st century, dropping its sugar and calories by more than half in response to a voluntary arrangement between the British government and the beverage industry. The drink itself is very similar to another citrus soft drink under the Coke umbrella, Fresca, and to a lesser extent Pepsi's version, or Squirt. However, Lil adds pineapple to the mix, which helps set it apart from at least some of the Caribbean-inspired carbonated beverages. Next up is another citrus beverage that's been around for almost a century, Tizer. Tizer was introduced in 1924 by Fred and Tom Pickup of West Yorkshire, England, and over the next 98 years it's swapped owners and ad slogans several times, with it presently known as the Great British Pop. And yes, those British rascals do still use the term pop occasionally, which no one under 60 ever says in America. Tizer has a rather small amount of sugar, even if they do try to disguise the figure by listing the amount per 100 milliliters without stating the final tally. For those interested, the total sugar is about 13.8 grams per can, which is a great deal less than, say, your average 12-ounce serving of Coke, which has nearly 40 grams of sugar. And I'd agree with the company that Tizer does have a rather unique taste. It definitely has a citrus vibe to it, but with the addition of black carrot and safflower concentrates. And I'd like to close out this British beverage spectacular with my favorite of the three, Club Lemon, which, despite its name, doesn't taste like seltzer water, though like seltzer, it does apparently make for a good mixer. Club is a series of Irish carbonated beverages that includes Club Lemon, Club Orange, Club Rock Shandy, a mix of lemon and orange, and Club Apple. The manufacturer, Britvic Ireland, advertises the series as the best bits in the world owing to the fact that it contains real fruit bits. And while I don't know about the best, and the lemon version actually reminds me of a carbonated non-alcoholic version of limoncello, the lemon flavor is that strong, despite that it's a very tasty beverage, due in no small part to the 40 grams of sugar. If you find the lemon zest of limoncello a bit overwhelming, you probably won't like this, but otherwise this is a pretty yummy treat. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. Everyone has their cinematic comfort food. During Christmas, some like Miracle on 34th Street or It's a Wonderful Life. For those born after the Great Depression, there's A Christmas Story and Home Alone. The truly evolved human beings prefer to watch John McClane dispatch a skyscraper filled with European models pretending to be Krauts. And then there's the strange creatures who enjoy National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Even though in real life, star Chevy Chase is about as holly jolly as the Third Reich, he's left an indelible mark on the silver screen, including this curiosity. So, of course, this 1989 John Hughes classic followed the natural progression of every cinematic phenom. Big screen, home video, cable with all the naughty words bleeped out, and chocolate bar. Because what's a satire of commercialism and spending the holidays with people you just as soon see in a mass grave without kitschy merchandise? And speaking of kitschy, in the film, Clark Griswold is expecting his yearly bonus from his snooty boss, but instead he gets a one-year membership to the Jelly of the Month Club, the gift that keeps on giving. So in the spirit of the film, the chocolate is beautifully sculpted like a certificate that no one with a functioning brain would actually want for Christmas. Now luckily there's no trace of actual jelly in or around this chocolate bar. Instead it's milk chocolate with a crispy rice filling, eerily similar to a Nestle Crunch bar. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Nestle Crunch is one of the finest and oldest American confections, but this generic National Lampoon's version isn't exactly the most original creation ever. Still, I've been wrong before. I'm assuming this is a Nestle Crunch clone, and you know what they say about assumptions. They make an ass out of... Nope, this is exactly like Nestle Crunch. Actually, let me retract that. This is an attempt to mimic the Nestle Crunch bar, but it falls a bit short. The chocolate isn't quite as rich as the Nestle version, and the crispy rice filling is spread a lot more thin. This isn't nearly as satisfying to bite into, and if it weren't for the National Lampoon tie-in, this would just be another cheap knockoff you find at the 5 and 10. But it is affiliated with National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and whoever made this, Palmer, did at least put some effort into the sculpt. For fans of the movie, this is good, clean, high sugary fun. But if you don't give a hoot about the Griswolds and their wacky antics, you can easily skip this in favor of Nestle's superior version. So I rate the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation chocolate bar 3.5 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. Cinnamon Toast Crunch is one of those American originals that seems like it's been around a lot longer than it actually has. Like this lump on my neck. But neither has been around for more than 4 decades or so, give or take a tumor. We previously mentioned on this channel that the original idea for Cinnamon Toast Crunch came from a Give Us Your Best Idea for a Cereal radio contest. And in exchange for this multi-billion-dollar idea, the winning child got a set of Hot Wheels. Seems fair to me. That was back in 1984, and over the preceding 38 years, CTC has seen a number of changes and flavor variants. And even the original, which began as plain squares and acquired a cinnamon swirl design over the years. Some of those variants have been inspired, and others, like CTC Rolls, should have stayed in the favorite dreams of a coked-out General Mills executive. Which brings me to this year's limited edition Christmas offering, Sugar Cookie Toast Crunch. Now, I'm kind of wondering what differentiates this from normal CTC, since the regular version is already no stranger to sugar, to say the least. With 12 grams per serving, this is in the upper echelon of sugary kid cereals, in both yumminess and its abundance of cavity-causing sweetness. And curiously, Sugar Cookie Toast Crunch has almost identical nutrition and ingredients as the normal stuff. So I'm curious what makes this one different, if such a term even applies. Now, this is an enigma. I pored over this ingredient list versus the normal one, and I still can't spot any obvious differences. But this has the unmistakable taste and whiff of old-fashioned sugar cookies, like Mama Midnight used to make. While the taste is admittedly subtle, the sugar cookie is definitely there, and as soon as I opened the box, I was greeted by the nostril-pleasing aroma of these sweet confections. Whatever the mad geniuses at General Mills did to massage these cinnamon sugary squares into mimicking sugar cookies, they deserve a gold star. The taste is a bit more subtle than I'd like, but like those rascals on the 1919 White Sox learned the hard way, you can't win them all. So I give Sugar Cookie Toast Crunch 4.5 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the Caribou Champion, the Juggernaut of Judea, the notorious Knight of Nazareth. Few know the true story of this mythical mammal, this renowned reindeer, so to help tell this whopper of a tale, I've done the unthinkable and enlisted the help of that flippant fop, that loathsome lion. Oh dear God, enough with your mindless Yankee Doodle prattle! Yes, I am Oliver Gerald, your guide to the finer things in life, including mythical animals who transport an obese man in red robes. A long time ago, a young reindeer began experiencing persistent fatigue, shortness of breath, and unexplained weight loss. When his reindeer kin finally convinced Rudiger James, or Rudolph for short, to see a doctor, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. The North Pole healthcare system is worse than America's, so Rudolph couldn't afford treatment. Instead, doctors recommended an experimental remedy involving gamma radiation. As a result of the treatment, Rudolph lost 90% of his body hair, and once the gamma rays impacted his nasal cavities, it turned them a nice, healthy candy apple red. Now, the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names, but it wasn't because of his cancerous nasal growth. You see, the experimental gamma treatment also made Rudolph incontinent. So he'd regularly be pissing and his little reindeer heart out. Oh, and Santa didn't put him at the front of the pack so he could light the way. This scarlet schnoz is a 40-watt bulb at best. No, jolly old Saint Nick was just a sick who liked torturing his indentured caribou. So when he put Rudolph at the front of the sleigh, the smell of urine and reindeer feces would waft backwards and assault the nasal cavities of Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen. And while you're mulling over Santa's latent fecalphilia, I'll pass it back to that American Muppet for an edible interlude. Yeah, so in honor of Rudolph, whose origin is a lot more horrifying than I remember, I'd like to examine a couple Rudolph-themed confections, starting with these officially licensed gummies. And speaking of which, you might think Rudolph is a public institution alongside jolly old Saint Nick and Jesus, but the rights to the reindeer with the maroon muzzle are actually held by the Rudolph Company for the story and Pearson PLC for publication and reprint rights. About as holly jolly as a tax audit. So the Rudolph gummies from Flicks Candy come in green apple Santa, strawberry Rudolph, and blue raspberry Sasquatch. And while the sculpts aren't quite as detailed as on the package, Rudolph looks like a cross between a rocking horse and Gorbachev's forehead. But they have a robust flavor, and unlike the famous Kraut gummies, these won't crack a tooth. So I give the Rudolph gummies 4 snazzy spoons out of 5. And now back to everyone's favorite cantankerous... Thank you, moron! So on one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say, Rudolph with your nose so bright, won't you contact the RAF about acquiring advanced radar and heads-up displays to help me navigate in zero visibility conditions? Because, you know, a tiny little maroon muzzle won't cut through the fog like a searchlight. That's just silly. After Santa delivered presents to all the good little boys and girls, with Saint Nick navigating by instruments alone, he gave Rudolph a large loan to finally get the surgery he so desperately needed. Except by then it was too late, and the cancer had spread to Rudolph's spinal column. And so, on January 3rd, 1632, Rudiger James Vanderdeer, aka Rudolph, aka Sanguine Snout, passed away from complications of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And he's lived on in folklore and popular entertainment, though most films leave out the part about Rudolph himself and the cancerous lymph nodes. With that, I'd like to thank my agent for booking me this thankless gig, and I pass it back to Edward Murrow. And thank you, Oliver, for that nightmare fuel. I'll close out this special look at Rudolph the Irradiated Reindeer with this adorable chocolate sculpt from the good folks at Palmer. who you might remember from the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation chocolate bar. Like that film tie-in, this is more of a novelty than a serious confection, but that said, this is one of the nicest sculpts I've ever seen, with food dye for his ear, eyeball, mouth, and of course his nose. And while the food dye is just that, and the whole confection has one uniform milk chocolate taste, that's nitpicking, because it's rich, sweet, and delicious, and the sculpt is stellar. If you'd like to memorialize Rudolph's tragic life, or celebrate him the old-fashioned way without death and incontinence, then pick this up from your local apothecaries or 5 and 10. So I give the Rudolph chocolate sculpt 4.5 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. Little Debbie represents everything good and decent about this wonderful little experiment called the United States of America. In the 1960s, the family-owned McKee Foods Corporation, which was founded during the Great Depression, decided to name a brand after the owner's granddaughter, 4-year-old Debbie. Little Debbie quickly became an American institution, with their oatmeal cream pies, Swiss cake rolls, and cosmic brownies, amongst other confections, and Debbie McKee still works for the company that bears her name. So combine a quintessential American enterprise like that with a holiday that's deeply woven into the fabric of this nation, and you've got Little Debbie Christmas tree cakes, which come in both yellow and chocolate cake varieties. Now, my dear sweet wife, my better half, the apple of my eye, promised to castrate me if I didn't get the chocolate version, so that made my decision an easy one. Say goodbye, fellas. No, I got the tree-shaped chocolate-flavored cakes with chocolatey cream filling, decorated with chocolate-flavored frosting, red and green sprinkles, and a white frosting stripe. So right off the bat, the interior of these cakes isn't really the main draw. They're not bad by any means, but they're not terribly original. More like our revamped Swiss cake roll. Of course, people love those. They're one of the treats that made Little Debbie more indispensable than the local speakeasy. But just don't expect some tasty revolution. It's the exterior that could make these a fine addition to your office Christmas party, alongside festive Lucky Strikes and some flowers for the dames in the typing pool. In that respect, the tree sculpt is lovely and the frosting delicious. And even if the cake and cream won't win the door prize for innovation, it continues the proud and patriotic tradition of Little Debbie. So I rate the Little Debbie Christmas tree cakes 4 snazzy spoons out of 5. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I'll see you next time. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off. Jimmy Midnight here with another special report. Have you ever wondered why our Jewish friends enjoy chocolate gelt during Hanukkah? No? Well, shut your commie pie hole and listen up, because I'm going to tell you anyway. Gelt itself is based on the Kraut word geld, or money, and the modern tradition supposedly dates back to 17th century Poland. Children would give Hanukkah money to their teachers, and before long the children got jealous and the parents gave them money too. Poor religious students at something called a yeshiva would also receive Hanukkah money from rich benefactors. As far as the symbolism of the coins, well, part of the Hanukkah story involves the miraculous victory of a group of Jewish rebels called the Maccabees over the Seleucid Empire around about 166 BC. After the Maccabean victory, the newly established Hasmonean dynasty minted national coins. In the 1920s, an American candy company called Lofts married ancient and modern traditions with the very first chocolate gelt, with coin-shaped treats wrapped in gold or silver foil and sold in mesh pouches resembling money bags. Other companies soon followed, though today most gelt in these United States is imported from the Netherlands or Israel. I'm just a humble newsman and part-time gumshoe, but when I have had gelt, I usually gravitate towards Manischewitz dark chocolate coins. You can taste that Hanukkah miracle. Thanks for joining me for another special report. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my televisual program, and I'd like to wish all my Jewish friends a happy Hanukkah. This is Jimmy Midnight signing off.